The universe is uncaused, like a net of jewels, in which each is only the reflection of all the others, in a fantastic, interrelated harmony without end. Self-realization is effortless. What you are trying to find is what you already are. Enlightenment is total emptiness of mind. There is nothing you can do to get it. Any effort you make can only be an obstruction to it. If you but cease from useless conceptualizing, you will be what you are and what you have always been. At the phenomenal level, the only thing that is not a concept is this knowledge which every single human being, every single sentient being at every time in history has known. I exist. I am in this moment, here and now. Seeing truly is not merely a change in the direction of seeing, but a change in its very center, in which the seer himself disappears. The only true understanding is that nothing is, not even he who understands. Concepts can, at best, only serve to negate one another, as when one thorn is used to remove another. Once removed, both thorns must be thrown away. Only in deep silence do we leave concepts behind. Words and language deal only with concepts, and so cannot approach reality. Between pure awareness and awareness reflected as consciousness, there is a gap which the mind cannot cross. The reflection of the sun in a drop of dew is not the sun itself. Manifestation may adopt any number of forms, but the substratum of all the myriad forms is consciousness, without which there cannot be anything. The source of consciousness is consciousness. Consciousness is all there is. The universe goes on its merry, mystical, magical way until you start observing it, and you, by observing it, create problems. The working of the universe has no problems. We feel that we can exercise our volition, yet deep down we know that there is an order infinitely more powerful which seems to dictate our life. The man of wisdom is devoid of evil, even though he may appear to use it. His vacant or fasting mind is neither doing anything nor not doing anything. He is outside of volition, neither this nor that. He is everything and nothing. There is no way you can control the consequences of your actions. Life is an impersonal flowing, and you cannot control either your life or anybody else's life. Real bliss is the absence of the wanting of bliss. The enlightenment state is not wanting either bliss or anything else. Enlightenment is merely an understanding in which there is no comprehender. It is a surrender in which there is no one to surrender anything. Your doubts will never be totally destroyed until perception has gone beyond mere phenomenality. And such perception is not a matter of will, but of grace. Only that which was prior to the appearance of this body consciousness is your true identity. That is reality. It is here and now, and there is no question of anyone being able to reach for it or grasp it. When the sense of me disappears completely, duality vanishes in ecstasy. To any conceptual problem, there cannot be any valid answer except to see the problem in perspective as an empty thought. There is no such thing as a problem which is other than merely conceptual. It is not possible to make the mind empty. To meditate, you don't have to have any objective, which means you don't have any expectation at all. In these moments, you don't find reality. The reality finds you. Just sit quietly for a moment. The entire phenomenal manifestation is based on the principle of duality, which starts with the sense of I am. Intellectual understanding is based on temporal cause and effect. Intuitive understanding is non-temporal, wherein cause and effect are one. Without self-realization, no virtue is genuine. It is only when you arrive at the deepest conviction that the same life flows through everything and that you are that life that you can begin to love naturally and spontaneously. Man's dread of insecurity and his hope of aid from a superior power against it drive him to create the concept of a supernatural God. Yet, this God and the very entity seeking security from it are both nothing What concepts? As far as metaphysical duality is concerned, there is no conflict between opposites. Man's conflict between good and evil, pleasure and pain, happiness and unhappiness is as unthinkable a nature as an electric current without both positive and negative polarity. The principle of polaric duality can only be understood metaphysically through the willing acceptance of all interrelated opposites as the very basis of the universe and life therein. True meditation means the annihilation of the ego. The ego doesn't want that. When meditation happens, promptly the mind says, stop wasting time, do something useful. An experience is never factual, but only conceptual. Whatever an experience may be, it is, nonetheless, only a happening in consciousness. Silence of the mind, which is the result of a deep understanding that meditation is a natural, spontaneous meditation which just happens. When you truly realize that this life and living is an absurdity, then you join in the dance. You take part in this absurdity. The mind, body, organism continues to live in the world, but without any sense of personal doership. Problems need to be dissolved, not solved, because there is no solution. The only way the problems get dissolved is, as soon as they arise, they are merely witnessed. When truth is realized, there is neither bondage nor liberation. Both the worlds we dream of when asleep and this world we dream while awake will have disappeared into the cosmic dissolution, which is the equivalent of the state of deep sleep. Love, as the word is generally understood, denotes separation, wherein true, non-objective relationship, we do not love others, we are others. Sensory experience cannot bind the person who treats it neither with zeal nor timidity, but with indifference. Absolute presence is the ubiquitous eye that measures the universe. It is the center of infinity that sees everything and yet does not see, because it is the seeing itself. It is not the present which is fleeting past us with sickening speed. The present moment is indeed eternal. It is our imperfect perception that creates the horizontal succession in time. Sequential duration is a consequence of the single-track verbalization of our split mind, which does not grasp the outer world instantaneously, but interprets it perversely by extracting bits and pieces and calling them things and events. The only condition for the realization of truth is that the knowledge of it be desired with tremendous intensity. You cannot see it. You cannot feel it. Only because you do not really want it. You are too preoccupied with enjoying and sorrowing over your finite existence. The sense of being alive, being present, is so intoxicating that one is enchanted by the manifestation it presents and gets so involved as to forget to find out if the spectacle really exists or is merely a hallucination, a dream, a mirage. Space and time, male and female, subject and object, being and non-being, all are lost in the flood of realization. Space and time, male and female, subject and object, being and non-being, all are lost in the flood of realization. Intellect is what brings about the sense of fear, because it is the intellect that rejects change and wants security. For a human being which considers itself an entity to remain puzzled, consciousness must produce new puzzles. All that is happening is that consciousness is amusing itself. When the understanding arises that this too shall pass, whether it is happiness or misery, that understanding will bring about a tremendous change in perspective. Only those who are able to see their own face without a mirror will be able to see their true nature. What kind of seeing is this? To see without the mirror is to see not with eyes, seeing objects, but as that which sees. It is the in-seeing or insight by consciousness itself in which there is no one who would see. When thought, discipline, and experience have done their utmost and finally accept utter defeat, then they cease to function altogether. That state is beyond both words and silence. It is neither one thing nor another. The absolute noumenon cannot be experienced. To know it is to be it. The knowledge of truth comes about when dispassion arises in a man after he has learned from personal experience that whatever life provides is truly health. The man of the world becomes the man of wisdom through recognizing that non-attachment is liberation, whereas the passion for sensory objects and experience is bondage. Both bondage and the resulting suffering are based not merely on identification with the body, but on identification with a wholly imaginary subjective entity inferred from bodily identity. The very first thought, I am, is the basis of all further thought, and indeed the very source of the mind. As water is serene when free of ripples, so is the mind serene when free of thought, when it is passive, fully receptive. When quiet, the mind reflects reality. When absolutely motionless, it dissolves, and only reality remains. Trying to control the mind forcefully is like trying to flatten out waves with a board. It can only result in further disturbance. The true understanding comes from outside. It is not of the space-time dimension. Therefore, we can only call it grace. Keeping our being open and receptive to that other dimension is a matter of grace. You can't fight the ego. Accept the ego and let it go on. This understanding will gradually push the ego back. The result of man's intellectual development is that, unlike everything else in nature, he longs for a perfect or ideal harmony which he has only conceptualized, but has not actually experienced. This is the perpetual problem from which he will never free himself by means of effort. The basic fallacy of man's search is that instead of being the universal consciousness or absolute principle, which he nominally is, he endeavors to attain an imaginary ideal happiness in his existence as a phenomenal object by trying to become something else. The dream world contains all the relevant features of the actual, but the continued appearance of a thing is not proof of its reality, regardless of whether it appears to the dreaming mind or the waking senses. Only with the dissolution of all appearance does one awaken to the ultimate reality of the self. When man accepts, finally, that he cannot make sense out of life on a basis of anything fixed, then, and only then, can life make sense. The personal self, or me, imagines itself to be limited and confined to a particular body. Self-inquiry seeks the source of this spurious me by focusing on it the spotlight of attention or awareness, whereupon the me vanishes because it does not have any independent existence. It is revealed as being merely an illusion. What remains is that same universal consciousness that was already always there as the true nature or very being of the artificial me. To be anxious is to wear oneself out. To seek power or to use force is to overstrain one's system. If deep down inside you want most desperately to survive and be in control of things, you cannot genuinely take the attitude of not worrying about it. And trying to stop worrying means making an effort to control. You must allow yourself the freedom to worry, to let the mind think whatever it wants to think. The fact of the matter is, it is His will, which has always prevailed. It is His will which is now prevailing, and it is His will which will prevail in the future. That is a fact. The longer it takes one to accept that fact, the longer one will suffer. Life and death are both concepts. The one being the absence of the other. The sage ignores such transient concepts and inheres in the noumenal presence which is everything. It is only matter that undergoes change or transformation, and which is subject to birth or death, while the noumenal presence remains eternally changeless.
The subject of truth is without substance, yet so very full and pregnant that no other subject has any value in comparison to it. The subject of truth is without substance, yet so very full and pregnant that no other subject has any value in comparison to it. Give one little chance to His will and see what happens. I think you will be surprised. Give one little chance to His will and see what happens. I think you will be surprised. You are not an individual being, let alone an individual doer. You're not even an individual entity. You are nothing. You are merely a pattern of vibrating energy. Truly understanding that, with conviction, will help tremendously. You are not an individual being, let alone an individual doer. You're not even an individual entity. You are nothing. You are merely a pattern of vibrating energy. Truly understanding that, with conviction, will help tremendously. The joke is that it is the ego, the me, that wants enlightenment. And enlightenment cannot come until the me is demolished. The joke is that it is the ego, the me, that wants enlightenment. And enlightenment cannot come until the me is demolished. Don't try to do anything out of the ordinary. Don't try to amend your life. Don't try to alter your way of life. Don't deliberately add anything. Don't deliberately subtract anything. Just carry on as you have been doing. What could be simpler than that? Don't try to do anything out of the ordinary. Don't try to amend your life. Don't try to alter your way of life. Don't deliberately add anything. Don't deliberately subtract anything. Just carry on as you have been doing. What could be simpler than that? Instead of getting involved in a mental process, it is simpler and more effective to remain in a position of joyous acceptance. A thought has come, it is witnessed, and it gets cut off. The witnessing does not need any mental processes. Instead of getting involved in a mental process, it is simpler and more effective to remain in a position of joyous acceptance. A thought has come, it is witnessed, and it gets cut off. The witnessing does not need any mental processes. The ordinary way of seeing is totally inadequate. A very special kind of seeing is needed for comprehending reality. An intuitive seeing, wherein it is seen that there's nothing to be seen, and no one to see it. The ordinary way of seeing is totally inadequate. A very special kind of seeing is needed for comprehending reality. An intuitive seeing, wherein it is seen that there is nothing to be seen, and no one to see it. In the absence of intention, there can be no psychological basis for any involvement in activity and events or their outcome. There is then perfect alignment with whatever might happen, an acceptance of events without any feeling of either achievement or frustration. All events must take their numerically determined course, consistent or inconsistent, and whether the person concerned in them is a self-realized sage or not. An ordinary individual, however, will feel gratified or frustrated, while a sage remains always totally unconcerned. In the absence of intention, there can be no psychological basis for any involvement in activity and events or their outcome. There is then perfect alignment with whatever might happen, an acceptance of events without any feeling of either achievement or frustration. All events must take their numerically determined course, consistent or inconsistent, and whether the person concerned in them is a self-realized sage or not. An ordinary individual, however, will feel gratified or frustrated, while the sage remains always totally unconcerned. The whole cosmos is an implicit unity expressed in explicit duality. The whole cosmos is an implicit unity expressed in explicit duality. The original interrelated opposites are beingness and non-beingness. The whole cosmos is an implicit unity expressed in explicit duality. The original interrelated opposites are beingness and non-beingness. Being can only come out of non-being, precisely as sound only emanates from silence and light from darkness. The imagined void of non-being, however, is not emptiness, but the very fullness of potential, out of which arises all that exists. Being can only come out of non-being, precisely as sound only emanates from silence and light from darkness. The imagined void of non-being, however, is not emptiness, but the very fullness of potential, out of which arises all that exists. Truth consists in being aware of what is without thinking about it. We do not really live, but are being lived. There is nothing anywhere but the one universal, impersonal I, and not a single object anywhere has any existence independent of it. Truth consists in being aware thinking about it. The true guru is not hiding anything of the truth. He is the very source of knowledge, indeed the knowledge itself, and everyone is free to take away as much as he can. There is no question of any personal giving or receiving, because no individual ever did exist. We speak of diversity in the manifest world as of water in a mirage. Time, space, and duality itself are all notions or concepts, mere thoughts. All is nothing but consciousness, appearing as mind. Time, space, and duality itself are all notions or concepts, mere thoughts. All is nothing but consciousness, appearing as mind, whether mountains, oceans, rivers, animals, or human beings. Did you find any need for knowledge 100 years ago? That which you do not know and cannot know is your true state. Did you find any need for knowledge 100 years ago? That which you do not know and cannot know is your true state. Self, experienced in the egoless state, is the supreme reality. The final truth is simple. All things exist in consciousness. All things flow from consciousness. All things are consciousness. Because consciousness is all there is. The final truth is simple. All things exist in consciousness. All things flow from consciousness. All things are consciousness. Because consciousness is all there is. Consciousness is all there is. All there is. Consciousness is all there is. I shall now tell you how to be able to acquire that basic secret knowledge. without the apprehension of which there cannot be anything gained, in which one must keep one's mind concentrated, that knowledge in which the yogi keeps himself constantly immersed. I shall convey to you clearly the very essence of this knowledge, like the nectar churned out of the ocean, or butter from the milk, so that you may give up the various practices that are based on mere untested concepts, and which are, therefore, only an exercise in futility, so long as there has not been a clear apprehension of the significance of the sublime pronouncements of the Mahavakyas, the great statements. Who can understand the extent of the seeker's misery, so long as he has not clearly apprehended and experienced the true nature of the Absolute? Those poor souls who have accepted shackles of physical penances and mental disciplines have in reality entangled themselves in doubt and indecision. How can they ever hope to cross the ocean of samsara? Worship, pilgrimages, charities, sacrifices, mantric and tantric practices can only provide time-bound results. Prayers and penances cannot bring about liberation unless there is self-knowledge, pure knowledge. Reality cannot shine forth until the basic unity of the individual phenomenon and the absolute noumenon is clearly apperceived, and there is an unblemished understanding of the nature of Maya, which is the cause of the apparent difference between the two. How can there be any question of liberation so long as the identification with the body as a separate entity doer is not lost through a proper understanding of the terms thou and that in the Mahavakya, the great statement that thou art? How can there be liberation unless there has been instruction on Vedanta from the lips of the Guru, meditation on the Guru's words, and total absorption in the Guru's teaching? Rules of conduct laid down by the Shastras are only meant for the smoother working of the social structure. The seeker should seek instruction from the Guru regarding the essence of Vedanta, whereby one would realize that state of liberation which is prior to thought and word. And when in that state of liberation there is the union of Jiva and Shiva, the state of duality disappears. When the Absolute Subject, with the help of its primordial energy, objectivizes itself as the multifaceted manifestation, the aspects of the creation, maintenance, and dissolution of the manifested universe happen in consciousness. Whatever has form and shape, and is therefore perceptible to the senses, is to be rejected, and that which is unseen and remains as the witness is to be recognized as the reality. Know that to be the reality, which is prior to the arising of consciousness, which is termed the all-knowing, all-controlling principle. That reality is the witness of everything. It cannot be measured by any criterion. It has no specific place of abidance. It is all-pervading, limitless, unknowable. That reality is what remains when everything that is illusory is rejected and is itself pure knowledge, pure joy, self-evident. That reality is all by itself the original fullness of potential, the plenum, prior to witnessing of all that is created, maintained, and dissolved. The absolute reality is totally apart from all aspects of manifestation. Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the one who maintains the universe, and Rudra, the destroyer, and the primeval power, consciousness. It is pure Brahman. It is only in this perspective that reality is to be apprehended. It will not be comprehensible by any other means and practices based on ignorance and duality. The superficial meaning of the term Vam, thou, is conveyed by that which is governed by Maya, the physical form. The true meaning of the term Tat, that, is pure Brahman, which cannot be apprehended except after due discrimination. A clear apperception of the true meaning of the term Tat is indeed liberation itself. The same sight in both eyes, the same sound in both ears, and the same word on both lips. Similarly, when one sees the same meaning in both Tat, that, and Vam, thou, the state of Brahman is attained, which is beyond duality. Just as the difference between the space in a pot and the space in a house disappears when both are broken up, so also the duality disappears when both terms are superimposed. The apparent difference between the two is only because of the illusion of Maya. As soon as the false is seen as false, only reality remains. The knowledge of the self is Advaita. That is non-duality, but it is obviously to be acquired in apparent duality, so that the duality disappears in due course when one remains firmly in that knowledge. Instead of looking ahead, as one usually does, one must look back and seek the source in order to realize one's true beingness. What one sees from this transformed perspective is nothing tangible, but an all-pervading oneness, where there is an absence of Maya and non-knowledge, something immeasurable, which one can know only by experiencing it. That knowledge of Brahman is self-effulgent, like a solid mass of profound happiness, the realization of which comports the end of conceptualizing. I shall tell you how to acquire that knowledge, by which you shall have perpetual peace and contentment. But one must first find out precisely who or what it is that is doing the seeking. The only thing you know as a matter of certainty is the fact I am. I exist. But you do not know who this I is. My friend, why have you forgotten yourself? Who are you, and where have you come from? Indeed, have you really gone anywhere or come from anywhere? You have never even thought of considering the matter on these lines. Are you the body, or is it you who have the body? You are the subject, and the body is your object. It is you who have the knowledge of the body, and indeed that you wear this body like a garment. Although you have acquired this body as a covering made of 5 elements, you have identified yourself with it, and you strut about as an individual. Be clearly aware that this body is an object, and that you are quite apart from it, and thus give up this mistaken identity with the body. You are aware of the constitution of your body, that the hair, skin, veins, flesh, and bones, the solid part of the body, represent the earth. Saliva, urine, blood, marrow, and semen, the 5 fluid materials, represent water. Hunger, thirst, indolence, sleep, and sex represent fire. Movement, running, resisting, relaxing, and contracting, the 5 kinds of activity, represent air. And desire, anger, grief, greed, and fear, the 5 qualities, represent ether. The physical body with these 25 parts, qualities, and activities has 6 natural changes. It is conceived, delivered, grows, matures, becomes old, and finally dies. You know the color and the form of this body, and the name it has been given. How then can you identify your beingness with the body that is something other than you? You, as the beingness or consciousness, are formless, whereas you can see the form of the body. In the waking state, it is consciousness that acts through the body and has the various experiences through the senses. The feeling that you have a particular name and form belongs to the mind, and you, as the knower of the body and the mind, are apart from both. Although you are apparently seen as the manifestation of the psyche, mind, intellect, concentration, and ego, nevertheless, you exist prior to the manifestation of these 5 constituents of the subtle body. It is consciousness that is there first, spontaneous, self-effulgent. The one who is aware of the rising passions and emotions is the mind, and it is the intellect which discriminates and decides. That which purposely concentrates on the decisions of the intellect is the chitta, or the operational center, and the one who accepts the doership of actions is the ego. It is you who are aware of this five-fold analysis of the psyche, because you are the self-awareness, or witness, or Atman. The thread is made out of cotton, though it is different in appearance. Similarly, mind, intellect, discrimination, and ego may appear to be different, but all arise from the same source, beingness, or conscious reality. The breeze is the cause of the ripple on the water, and the twist in the cotton is the cause of the thread. Similarly, Maya is the cause of the appearance of the subtle body. When the cause is removed, both the ripple and thread disappear. Similarly, with the arising of self-knowledge and the removal of ignorance, Maya becomes exposed and disappears. When the ripple and the water, or the thread and the cotton, unite, the duality disappears. Similarly, when mind merges into consciousness, the sense of duality disappears. The psyche is the subtle body, and the relevant condition is the dream state that is based on desire. Mind works through the senses, and such desires that remain dormant in the mind manifest themselves in the dream state as objects and desires that have been experienced earlier. The manifestation of the dream world occurs because of that very speck of consciousness that illuminates the psyche, just as the heat that heats a metal in sunlight is the quality of the sun. It is this consciousness that has made manifestation possible. If consciousness were to disappear, there would be no manifestation to perceive, and you would be in your original state of the fullness of the potential, the plenum. If you are able to reject as illusion, without any substance, all that you see and experience in your consciousness, then you will be immersed in what remains as reality. Consciousness will remain merged within itself, without movement. The shadow shows the shape, form, and parts of the original body, but is really without substance. Similarly, the one who says, "I do not know," is an illusion. There is the prior one who knows or witnesses the other one who says, "I don't know." The fact of the not knowing was known not to ignorance, but to knowledge. That knowledge to which the not knowing was known is the Atman. Make no mistake about it. Even if one believes that one does not have self-knowledge, this very fact could not have been known in the absence of knowledge. I know that I do not know. Therefore, ignorance as such is an illusion. If you know that you do not know, why do you unnecessarily involve yourself in the concept of ignorance? This ignorance is itself the causal body, of which the physical body and the subtle body are the instruments. Listen now to the symptoms and the quality of deep sleep. Various concepts based on the events in the waking state arise in the mind and reflect themselves in the dream state. But when consciousness, which is the substratum for both the waking state and the dream state, suspends its operation, then comes the state of deep sleep, total non-knowledge. This non-knowledge is true knowledge, because it is the absence of both knowledge and ignorance, which are both polaric, interrelated opposites. When consciousness reemerges into movement, the deep sleep state forgets its true nature and again identifies itself with the individual entity and accepts the world as real. When, however, ignorance gets discarded, reality shines, just as gold remains in its purity when the impurities are destroyed in the fire. After ignorance has been demolished and self-knowledge has come about, that which sees the physical, the subtle, and causal bodies as a witness is the super-causal body. This is the Turiya state. When, through self-knowledge, the working bodies and the causal bodies are demolished, the supercausal body itself cannot survive. When the effect is destroyed, the cause cannot survive. That changeless state, where one is aware of one's self-existence, is Parabrahman, liberation, reality. Meditation along these lines results gradually into firm conviction, and then one experiences the hollowness of the world. When both knowledge and non-knowledge disappear, then will dawn that knowledge which is the absolute reality. One must recede into the source, whence springs all knowledge. That source is reality, the immeasurable potential, the plenum into which consciousness ultimately merges itself. That reality which is self-effulgent is subjectivity, and therefore cannot have a seer to see it as an object. Reality, therefore, cannot be a void. It is neither consciousness in movement, nor manifestation, nor ignorance, but the fullness of pure knowledge, the limitless potential beyond comprehension. You are that reality, the absolute plenum, the fullness of potential that has gobbled up even the concept of the void, that self-effulgent source of everything. It is this reality that you should understand yourself to be: independent, pure, the witnessing principle whose clear image it is impossible to visualize. You are that reality, where all that is illusory has been absorbed, where the duality of a thou cannot survive, and so the terms that and thou have become superfluous. First, convince yourself about your true nature, as has been expounded so far, and then adopt the regular practice as follows. Find a quiet spot, sit quietly, calm and relaxed, and check the outward flow of thoughts. With an attitude of renunciation towards all that is manifest, the mind should be turned inwards, away from the sense objects to the core of the heart. Then give up gradually your identification, first with the gross physical body, and then with the subtle body and the causal body, and let your mind be one with space. Release your attention smoothly and effortlessly from the gross senses and let it merge with the total mind or consciousness. Wherever the attention strays, it should again be brought back into the vacant mind, smoothly and gradually, so that with patience, the period of concentration, not tension, becomes longer and longer. Whatever object the mind gets attracted to, let your discrimination reject it as illusory and worthless. It is only in this manner that the mind will soon give up its flights of fancy and remain in quietude, until the mind naturally remains in consciousness, having given up its affinity with material things. Persistent but gentle persuasion is necessary to make it drop whatever it tends to get involved in return to its source. As you keep watching your mind and discover yourself as the witness, nothing else can appear on the screen of your consciousness. Two things cannot occupy your mind at the same moment. When you understand that anything with a shape and form is, by its very nature, a hollow shell without substance, and that what is real is formless, the light of consciousness, you will be immersed in the depth of reality. When the mind gets absorbed in consciousness, all objects disappear from the mind. Do not put yourself in the position of the person who suddenly wakes up in the deepest dark of the night and thinks he has become blind. Do not get yourself enveloped in the darkness of ignorance. See all manifest phenomena as an illusion and remain peacefully in reality. Delve within and find out where the thoughts arise. Seek the source of all thought. It is this source, the consciousness, which must seek and acquire the self-knowledge. It can only happen. Imagine for a moment that everything that is now manifest, including one's own body, has suddenly disappeared. Where precisely is it that the resulting nothingness would be registered? All that remains is I consciousness. Inside and outside, there is nothing other than the nothingness of the void, which is the fullness of being, the potential plenum. That on which consciousness has arisen must surely be prior to consciousness. Understand beyond any doubt that it is this source of consciousness that you are in reality. It is in consciousness that everything appears, including your sentience, the I am sense of presence, and the psyche consisting of mind, intellect, discrimination, and the ego. Once this fact is clearly apprehended, nothing can remain other than self. Whenever you think, it is the mind that does the thinking. When the me is involved in the thinking, it is the ego. When you are quiet, the very quietude is in the consciousness itself. Consider this. If you could have remained absolutely quiet, would any mnemonical recollection have ever sprouted? Would there have been any wish, any desire? If you could have remained absorbed in the consciousness, would you have been troubled by thoughts? Would there have been any cause then to identify yourself with the body as a separate individual? Therefore, my friend, that wherein all ignorance disappears is in a totally different dimension. If there were not something called pure knowledge, the totality of all potential, where would the ego have arisen? This pure and perfect knowledge, neither knowledge nor non-knowledge, is not aware of itself. It becomes a witness only when a movement in consciousness presents some manifestation to witness. Giving up your identification with the body, if you would remain quietly absorbed in the sense of the totality, in the I am, without attachment, you will know all that is to be known. When you thus remain immersed in consciousness, the personal, identified consciousness, having lost the power of Maya, will itself take you to its source, which is what you are, reality. In that state, there is no duality of any kind. All interrelated opposites have been naturally superimposed into nothingness. All there is pure knowledge, pure beingness, pure subjectivity. One cannot hold it. One cannot drop it. One cannot say it is. One cannot say it isn't. Indeed, it cannot be something one can experience. It is only something that is nothing, to be apperceived, to be felt to be, and to remain in. Hold on to the sense I am, to the exclusion of everything else. The mind, being thus silent, will shine with a new light and vibrate in the totality. When you keep the I am feeling in the focus of awareness and watch yourself ceaselessly, when there is continuous witnessing of all movements in consciousness, the conscious and the unconscious will, for a time, play the game of hide and seek. Flip-flops will happen until, finally, the two become one, and the one becomes the totality. The individual then merges in the witness in awareness, in pure being. Who is there then to take a measure of that ecstasy?